Impeaching Reconstruction Part 2, 1868 until 1877. On March 17, 1868, as a result of the conditions of reentry, South Carolina had to elect new state governments and representatives. For the first time ever, a state's legislature was majority black. That means the majority of the senators and representatives of the state of South Carolina were black. Let that sink in. That's a major rewriting of what was thought possible, and I guarantee you don't see that kind of representation today. In July of 1868, the 14th Amendment became law. South Carolina and several other rebel states had re-entered the Union just in time for the 1868 elections. Throughout Louisiana, white gangs terrorized freedmen to depress the vote. Republicans in Georgia had to abandon campaigning altogether. Despite the best efforts of racists, over 500,000 black men voted in the 1868 election. And as a result, every southern state except Georgia and Louisiana voted for Ulysses S. Grant. Despite the victory, the sluggers hypothesized that if the right was inalienable by race, that they could win more elections. On February 26, 1869, the 15th Amendment was passed. On February 3rd of 1870, the 15th Amendment was ratified. This paved the way for the first black men in Congress. Senator Hiram Rhodes Revels from Mississippi, Representative Joseph Rainey from South Carolina, and Representative Jefferson Long from Georgia were the first congressmen ever seated to the United States representatives. Four years after slavery had ended, Southern black men were serving as federal officials in the United States. Over 1,500 black men moved into positions of leadership during Reconstruction. In 1872, in spite of the fact of electing more black men to Congress and Ulysses S. Grant being re-elected, Republicans began to lose ground in Congress and Northerners began to lose sight of doing right by freedmen. After years of prosperity, an economic crash happened, dubbed the Panic of 1873. Prior to 1929, this crash was known as the Great Depression. The panic was caused by unprecedented capitalist expansion. Americans had laid more railroad tracks, dug more mines, and planted more crops than they could get a profit from. The banks loaned all these industries all the money to finance the expansion. So when the bill came due, the economy crashed. In 1874, the Democrats won the House for the first time since the end of the Civil War. The crash hit Republicans hard, and as Northerners and Republicans turned their attention from civil rights to the economy, they lost more elections. During 1874 to 1875, there was what was known as the Whiskey Ring, which was a criminal organization of people avoiding the whiskey tax. President Grant wanted all offenders caught in this ring to be punished with the utmost severity without mercy. That was all except for Grant's personal secretary, who was found to be a major player in the ring. Grant wrote a personal letter to the jury on behalf of the secretary, and they exonerated the secretary. The corruption sullied all the goodwill left for the Republican Party. And during the 1876 election, both candidates would run anti-corruption campaigns, and on the end of Reconstruction. In the election of 1876, the Democrats nominated Samuel J. Tilden, and the Republicans nominated Rutherford B. Hayes. The election of 1876 resulted in disputed electoral votes in South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. Though Tilden won the popular vote, in such cases where electoral votes are disputed, Congress is supposed to decide the winner. But Congress punted on this charge and made a 15-man electoral commission. The committee consisted of 7 Democrats and 8 Republicans, giving the election to Rutherford B. Hayes, who made a compromise to appease the Democrats in the committee. It was called the Compromise of 1877, and it was the end of the military occupation of the former rebel states, ending Reconstruction and sacrificing the humanity of the freedmen for 80 years, leaving racist institutions intact to this day. When it's all said and done, the Republicans chose power over humanity, the same way they do today, the same way the Democratic Party does today. They looked at the options and they chose white power. They saw that the power wasn't in protecting all people of all skin colors. The power was in appealing to white ideals. A safe, amorphic ideal that's based in anonymity and not uniqueness. You can watch the transaction today in real time. It's happened to Jewish people already. I have several friends who have realized they're 2 or 3 generations removed from their Jewish heritage. These people growing up had no clue that this was a part of their history. That is the price of whiteness. You must give up your culture, your heritage that you come from, your traditions, and appeal to becoming this amorphic being that lives outside of anything in particular that can be gotten to the core of. And today is for Latinx people to assimilate into American culture. Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, this is the outline for the future. Hollow out the ones that can pass and hide the ones who don't. This is the legacy of white people. Not white skin, but white people. These are just my closing thoughts. I find it interesting that the northern aggression and the tyranny Southerners have always complained about in the Civil War all occurred in Reconstruction, and rightfully so. I'm no authoritarian, but every tyrannical overstep was in service to humanity and was justified. The ends of those tyrannical means was a greater, more inclusive democracy, and the decline to aid civil rights was the opposite. I can't believe there was an actual electoral college crisis, and conservatives armed and trained militias to fight for Tilden. Their slogan was literally Tilden or blood. Sounds a lot like Stop the Steal. The difference, of course, being that Tilden won the popular vote, and the Electoral College was tied when the decision was sent to Congress. It was complete opposite of what we had go on, and yet they were willing to take the L, unlike the Trump supporters who couldn't understand, couldn't fathom, losing. They couldn't fathom their guy not being popular. The Democrats in the 1870s were willing. They were saying they were gonna be willing to fight and go to war again for Tilden if Tilden didn't win, and they didn't. But today, for a person who didn't win the popular vote, for the person who didn't have an electoral college tie. They actually went to the Capitol and stormed it to try and put their guy back on top. That's just hilarious to me. I feel like that's the cream of the crop, and that's the best way to end this. Like and subscribe.